Hello students, today we are on day 4 of our Holocaust Past to Present Historical Modern Day Event Graphic Organizer. We are working through chapters of the iBook, and both of these are embedded in your daily playlist. So far, we completed the first page on the left-hand side of the graphic organizer with chapter 1 and the first 2 boxes on page 2 with chapter 1. Chapter 2, we covered the first 2 boxes on page 2 and the first box on the left on page 3. And with Chapter 3, we covered 1 box, which was the second box on the 3rd page. Today, with reading Chapter 4, we're going to fill in the last box on page 3 and the entirety of the left-hand side on page 4. So have this open, and as we read, you're going to be transposing information into the graphic organizer. Today's chapter, Chapter 4, Work Camps and Death Camps. So just to coincide with our graphic organizer, our first question here, what were ghettos during the Holocaust? As we read the first 2 pages, we're going to be filling in this box here. Feel free to follow along in your iBook. During the Holocaust, the creation of the ghettos was a key step in the Nazi process of separating, persecuting, and ultimately destroying Europe's Jews. Key facts. The ghettos were set up to segregate Jews from the rest of the population. They were designed to be temporary. Some lasted only a few days or weeks, others for several years. The vast majority of ghetto inhabitants died from disease or starvation, were shot or deported to killing centers. During World War II, the German concentrated urban and sometimes regional Jewish populations in ghettos. Living conditions were miserable. Ghettos were often enclosed districts that isolated Jews by separating Jewish communities from the non-Jewish population and from other Jewish communities. The Germans established at least 1,000 ghettos in German-occupied and annexed Poland and the Soviet Union alone. There were 3 types of ghettos: closed ghettos, open ghettos, and destruction ghettos. Taking a look at key information to transpose over to our graphic organizer, these were temporary districts that were set up in order to isolate Jews by separating them from the rest of the population. Originally, this was used as a segregation technique so that the Jews could be found easily and then eventually taken to the work and death camps. So this piece here, we should be putting in this box. Let's add some additional information. Let's put there were at least 1,000 ghettos in German-occupied, annexed Poland and Soviet Union, and that there were 3 types: closed, open, and destruction. Chapter 4, page 2, with the implementation of the final solution, the systematic plan passed by the German government to murder all European Jews beginning in late 1941. The Germans systematically destroyed the ghettos. The Germans and their auxiliaries either shot ghetto residents in mass graves located nearby or deported them. Jews were deported to killing centers. German SS and police authorities also deported a small majority of Jews from ghettos to forced labor camps and concentration camps. Jews were transported from ghettos to work and concentration camps with cattle cars that were arranged by government transportation. So these were not permanent. They were put up temporarily to collect the community who was Jewish in order to transport them to the final solution. So there is a gallery 4.1 that goes along with this particular section. So if you want to, in your iBook, you can click on the gallery and review the photos, and there is more information posted there. So in addition to what we have so far in this box on page 3, we're also going to put that in 1941, the ghettos were destroyed. And from there, Jews were deported to killing centers. So from there, this box should now be complete, and we're going to move to page 4, work camps. Again, feel free to slow down and you can go into the galleries. There are videos and additional links posted as well. Concentration labor camps. The Nazis subjected millions of people, both Jews and other victim groups, to forced labor under brutal conditions. From the establishment of the first Nazi concentration camps and detention facilities in the winter of 1933, forced labor, often pointless and humiliating, was imposed without proper equipment, clothing, nourishment, or rest. It formed a core part of the concentration camp regimen. These forced labor camps had Jewish men and women perform pointless hard labor tasks until they died from exhaustion. They were not given proper clothing or nourishment. For example, prisoners were forced to run up 186 steps out of a stone quarry while carrying heavy boulders. The conditions in the sleeping quarters were unsanitary and horrific. Those who attempted to escape were shot by Nazi soldiers. Again, here we have Gallery 4.2 for forced labor camps. Feel free, if you're using the iBook version, to click on the first photo and you'll be able to peruse through additional photos. Taking a look of content that we're going to put over in our box 1 on page 4. Here we're going to do a definition. Nazis subjected millions of people to forced labor under brutal conditions. It was often pointless and humiliating. The hard labor tasks were created to have people work so hard until they were exhausted and eventually died. And then we'll also put this in box 1 as well. We'll now move to our middle box on page 4. What were death camps during the Holocaust? The Nazis established killing centers for efficient mass murder. Unlike concentration camps, which served primarily as detention and labor centers, killing centers, also referred to as extermination camps or death camps, were almost exclusively death factories. German SS and police murdered nearly 2,700,000 Jews in the killing centers, either by asphyxiation with poison gas or by shooting. The first killing center was Chełmno, which opened in Warthagu, part of Poland in annexed Germany, in December of 1941. Mostly Jews, but also Roma, Gypsies, were gassed in mobile gas vans there. In 1942, the General Government, a territory in the interior of occupied Poland, the Nazis opened the Belzec, the Sobibor, and the Treblinka killing centers, known collectively as Operation Reinhard camps, to systematically murder the Jews of Poland. In Operation Reinhard killing centers, the SS and their auxiliaries killed approximately 1,526,500 Jews between March of 1942 and November of 1943. Here we have 2 photos. This one here is of a gas chamber where individuals would be packed in. They would be told that they were taking a shower to clean before they were going to their work, and poisonous gas was then put into the chamber. From there, everyone would die. The bodies would be collected and would be taken to a giant crematorium. Here is the outside of one of the killing centers. Basically, we have buildings set up with different gas chambers and crematoriums. Auschwitz-Birkenau. Almost all of the deportees who arrived at the camps were sent immediately to death in gas chambers, with the exception of very small numbers chosen for special work teams, known as Sonderkommandos. and those who were taken to the scientists and doctors to be experimented upon. The largest killing center was Auschwitz-Birkenau, which by spring of 1943 had 4 gas chambers, using Zyklon B poison gas in operation. At the height of the deportations, up to 6,000 Jews were gassed each day at Auschwitz-Birkenau in Poland. Over 1 million Jews and 10,000 other Roma, Poles, and Soviet prisoners of war were killed there by November of 1944. Here we have Gallery 4.3, which is images specifically from Auschwitz-Birkenau. Each of them have captions explaining what you're looking at. You don't have to flip through Gallery 4.3, but it's there if you would like to look at the photos. So, over here, what were death camps during the Holocaust? Let's look at some information that we're going to put here. These were killing centers of efficient mass murder. We're going to put some numbers in here. These pieces you can actually copy and paste from your iBook or your PDF version over into the graphic organizer. We're going to list a couple from Poland. And then we'll put some information about Auschwitz. Okay, so this is the information we should be putting into that box. Now we're on to the bottom box on page 4. What were death marches? When Allied forces made their way towards concentration and death camps, the Nazis had the Jews evacuate before they could be saved. The evacuations of the concentration camps had 3 purposes. 1. SS authorities did not want prisoners to fall into enemy hands alive to tell their stories to Allied and Soviet liberators. 2. The SS thought that they needed prisoners to maintain production of armaments wherever possible. 3. Some SS leaders, including Himmler, believed irrationally that they could use Jewish concentration camp prisoners as hostages to bargain for a separate peace in the West that would guarantee the survival of the Nazi regime. On these marches, the Jews were led in lines and were forced to walk in the opposite direction of the forces trying to rescue them. The SS guards had strict orders to kill prisoners who could no longer walk or travel. As evacuations depended increasingly on forced marches and travel by open rail car or small craft in the Baltic Sea in the brutal winter of 1944 to 45, the number who died of exhaustion and exposure along the routes increased dramatically. During these death marches, the SS guards brutally mistreated the prisoners. Following their explicit orders, they shot hundreds of prisoners who collapsed or could not keep pace on the march, or who could no longer disembark from the trains or ships. Thousands of prisoners died of exposure, starvation, and exhaustion. Forced marches were especially common in the late 1944 and 1945 winter as SS evacuated prisoners to camps deeper within Germany. As Allied forces advanced into the heart of Germany, they liberated hundreds of thousands of concentration camp prisoners. This included thousands of prisoners whom Allied and Soviet troops liberated while they marched on forced evacuations. Here we have a video that shows this and explains it in more depth, so you can click on Movie 4.1 and it will give you a broader overview of death marches. So as the Nazis start realizing that there are troops coming from other countries to push Germany back into Germany, they are forcing the Jews to evacuate the death camps, and they're making them march in the opposite direction of the people trying to save them. So, here for death marches, we're going to have this is the evacuation of Jews from death camps, but we're going to list the three reasons behind them. So, the authorities did not want prisoners to tell their stories, they didn't want to be liberated and tell their stories. They thought they needed them in order to keep production of all of the products they were using for the war. And then some also believed that they could use the Jewish prisoners as hostages to bargain for their freedom. So these are the key pieces of information that we're going to be putting in this last box here. So that concludes chapter 4. And the last chapter, chapter 5, will be liberation. So we will tackle that tomorrow. Please save your graphic organizer. And again, up to this point, you should be completely through page 4 of the graphic organizer. And tomorrow we will end our historical piece of the graphic organizer.